Hey guys, Liko here. How's it all going? Hope you're well, and I'm really glad that you decided to click on this video today. This is my Stamina Warden PVE build and rotation video for the Flames of Ambition patch. There is actually quite a fair bit of stuff that I'm going to cover in this video since there have been a rather large number of changes, so here's a quick summary. First, I will go through some of the general choices for Stamina Warden, such as race, Mundus Stone and food. Following this, I'll dive straight into 4 different setups that I'm going to show to you today. These all include a Parse with the rotations detailed in the description and some recommendations for champion point allocation as well, which is probably the biggest change of the lot, seeing as we're using a completely new champion point system now. Out of the 4 setups, there will be 3 different melee ones and a Bobo one, which is something I haven't showcased in a long time. I will be showcasing 2 out of the 4 Parses myself, and with thanks to the help of Roskag and Cortec as well, who have generously offered to provide the other 2. So for the choice of race, Orc used to be the flat out best for stamina DPS, but this is no longer the case. From now I will recommend either Khajiit or Dunmer as your very top choices. It's a toss up between the 2, so honestly go with whichever you prefer out of those. However, having said, Orc really isn't too far behind. It still has some other very useful perks, so if you're currently an Orc, this doesn't mean you have to race change. So for the choice of Mundus Stone, in many cases for stamina DPS, I would recommend the Thief Mundus Stone for extra critical chance. If your crit chance is already pretty high before picking a Mundus Stone, like around 65 or 70%, then you could go with the Shadow Mundus Stone instead for extra critical damage. Now I can't put an exact number on it, as it will depend on your exact build that you set up with, but if in doubt, I would go with Thief. Choice of food. Now this will most likely depend on your level of sustain and your HP threshold that you're comfortable running with. If you could do with a little more extra sustain and you don't feel like you need the extra HP, then lava, foot, soup and salt rice would be the way to go. If you're practicing on a target dummy, then I would also recommend selecting this food. If your sustain is decent but you need a little help with it and you need some HP as well, then I would recommend the Artaeum takeaway broth, which gives the best mixture of everything useful. If you don't need any help with your sustain, then you can go with max HP, max stamina food such as braised rabbit with spring vegetables, and this should give you the most DPS as long as you don't run out of resources. I should also mention, just in case, but there is also a pure max stamina food which gives a tiny bit more max stamina than all the previous, but nothing else. It also doesn't last as long, so for most people this is not worth it. An example of this is the hearty garlic corn chowder. Okay, so for setup 1 we are using 5 pieces of Kinra's Wrath. This is a brand new set that you can collect from the Black Drake Villa dungeon in the upcoming release. The 5-piece bonus is really cool. When Burning Heart is up, after keeping up light attack stacks, you gain Major Berserk, and you also grant Minor Berserk to those around you. This is probably the first example of a buff set that also gives an extra benefit to the wearer, and yeah, hope to see more of these coming forward as well. Next we have 5 pieces of Relequen, and yeah, this has been a bread and butter component for stamina DPS for several years now. You'll notice that for both these sets, keeping up light attacks is key. Next we had the Vatashran Perfected Daggers. These got released with the new arena that was released back in the autumn of last year. Now I hadn't really played around with them much until now, but they work really well across a number of different stamina classes, so I do recommend you go farm this if you haven't already. Basically, it makes Shrouded Daggers really strong and cheap to use, as long as you're standing behind the target. Lastly, we have the Blackrose Perfected Daggers on the back bar. Dealing damage with Deadly Cloak gives 6% damage done and reduces damage taken by the same percentage. Infused daggers are best here, as we won't spend a lot of time on this bar. I've chosen the Frost and Flame enchants because they're really good, and the Flame enchants do a lot of burning damage, especially if you have enough blue CP to get the extra status effects. A Berserker Glyph can work really well here as well. So for our skills, Growing Swarm is a 10-second dot, Cutting Dive is our main spammable above 70% HP, Barb Trap is a dot that you should keep up throughout for minor force, Shrouded Daggers is our spammable that we can use from 70% HP and below. The lower the enemy's HP, the stronger the damage, thanks to the Vatashran Daggers, and this offers also some really great cleave damage as well. Subterranean Assault is a skill that you should try and cast every 6 seconds no matter what, and it fires a nice AoE burst twice within that time frame after 3 seconds and 6 seconds. The Bear is a really strong ultimate which does a lot of damage on its own, and you can activate it for another big hit. On the back bar, Deadly Cloak is a 10-second pulsing AoE that you'll need to be in fairly close range to hit with. You should aim to keep this up every 12 seconds at most with the Blackrose daggers in mind. Soul Trap is a magicka casting dot that scales with our highest stats, which is really good for sustain. This slot here is a flex. You can put anything useful here that you want, such as a self-heal like Vigor. Winter's Revenge is a magicka based and magicka scaling AoE, but with the new changes to CP and stats, it's actually pretty good. This can also be worth using for the extra chilled status effect. Finally, Rending Slashes is another 10-second dot. Okay, so moving on, here is a Parse using that setup. Now, in my opinion, this setup allows us to have the easiest rotation to use, especially if you are a console player without add-ons. The reasons are, I don't really need to bother to trap off balance, where usually on a Stamina Warden rotation, you're trying to spam burrs at these points, as you might see in the later setups. Below 50%, when the Veteran's Dagger Sustain factor comes in, the rotation becomes extremely easy. You can feasibly drop all dots except Deadly Cloak and Barb Trap at this point, whilst spamming literally Shrouded Daggers for the rest of the time, whilst occasionally activating your bear. Now, I don't exactly do that here, but looking back through the combat logs, this is actually very possible, and yeah, I'll share the static rotation in the description below the video. Of course, the only caveat to this is that you must be behind the boss. There are a few instances where this isn't possible. The most obvious are each of the Sunspire bosses, where you actually stand in front of the dragons. Also worth noting that there is a new blue champion point slottable, which is dependent on you being behind the boss as well, so keep that in mind. Anyway, I'll catch up with you after this pass, so enjoy that, and yeah, we'll talk about the results of the pass and summarise the champion point allocation in just a little bit. Okay, cool. So as you can see, Subterranean Assault did loads of damage, and this is because I was focused on keeping it up 100% of the time, casting every 6 seconds. Shrouded Daggers also hit really hard, and yeah, I got a little unlucky with a crit on this one, but had I dropped more of my dots earlier, which I mentioned is probably, equally as good, it would have contributed to a lot more of the total damage. So let's talk briefly about the champion point setup here. If you need a complete guide to the new champion point system, of course this isn't going to be it. Here I will show the 4 blue CP Slottables selected, and the rest of the allocated points are really invested into various stats which you can increase with your extra blue CP earned. Any specific questions though, please do ask in the comments and I'll try and get back to you. The 4 Slottables selected are Backstabber, Fighting Finesse, Deadly Aim and Biting Aura. Backstabber can be replaced with any other Slottable in Sunspire. Okay, so now for setup 2, the gear is basically the same, with the exception of using the Master's daggers instead of the Veteran's daggers. This means we drop Shrouded daggers from our skill bars and move Rending Slashes to our front bar. So yeah, in place of Shrouded daggers, we now use Whirling Blades, which is an AoE execute ability, and we will start to use this over the birds at roughly 35% boss HP. I didn't bother to figure out the exact value, but it's around there somewhere. The only other skill differences now are that we activate Barbed Trap on the back bar rather than the front, and I put the Born Etch on the butt bar as well as our flex skill, since Sustain is a little tougher with this setup. Right, so here we go again, but with the Master's Daggers. This is, I would say, a rather more complex rotation, and honestly it feels like everything is on fire when you compare it to the Veteran Daggers rotation I just showed you. The main takeaways are that you keep up all of your dots the whole way through more or less, whilst especially making sure that Rending Slashes is up, as they are what are buffed by the Master's Daggers. It's worth paying a little more attention to spamming birds when off balance is up, but again, not a super key part of this rotation, and at around 35% start replacing birds with Whirling Blades, and in execute whenever you cannot get a full duration out of your dots anymore, consider just spamming Whirling Blades at that point. Keep up Subterranean Assault every 6 seconds up until this point as well. Also bear in mind, in much shorter fights this period can come and go really fast, so do pay attention to the boss's health bar and you'll be good. Again, after this pass is done, I'll catch up with you so we can go through the CMX pass again. For the blue CPs, by the way, the floor Slottables are exactly the same as the previous: Backstabber, Fighting Finesse, Deadly Aim, and Biting Aura. Again, Backstabber can be replaced with any other Slottable of your choice in somewhere like Sunspire. Alright, so you can see here with this rotation, dots make up a lot more of our damage since we keep them up more or less the whole time. You can probably start casting Whirling Blades a little sooner than I did as well. Rending Slashes did a total of 8k damage, adding together all the different components, and contributes a little bit more towards that new hemorrhaging status effect as well, which isn't much, but it still adds up, I guess. So the third setup here is a more classic one performed by Roskag. He's gone with a monster set here, Celine's, but Marslock would be a great option in a raid scenario. In addition, he uses Advancing Yokeda with 2 daggers on the front bar here. This set has actually had its total crit rating bonus reduced since last patch, in line with most other crit heavy sets, but it's still pretty good. In terms of the skills and the rotation, it's fairly similar to the ones shown earlier, although I suppose there is a little more emphasis on spamming the birds when the off balance is up here by Roskag. The damage potential of this setup is roughly equal to the other two previously shown once we take into account Master Lock damage, which is obviously greater in the buffed raid group. Here you can also go with the same blue CP Slottables as mentioned before: Backstabber, Fighting Finesse, Deadly Aim and Biting Aura. And yeah, after this we will see the fourth and final pass of this video, the Bobo pass by Cortec. Okay, cool. So thanks and well done for making it to this point in the video. Here we now have a really powerful Bobo setup that will shortly be demonstrated by Cortec. But first, the gear. We have the Blackrose Perfected Bow as our front bar weapon. Basically, whenever you use Scattershot, in our case we'll most likely pick the Magnum Shot morph for more damage, you leave a really strong damage over time effect on the enemy. And yeah, I don't think I've ever showcased any usage of this weapon on this channel before, despite it being around for a couple of years, which is kind of cool I guess. Also worth mentioning at this point that when you use Scattershot, you shouldn't bar swap until the attack has actually hit the enemy, or else you won't get the bleed damage at all. Also worth noting that the further away you are, the longer the bleed lasts for, but we get it easy for when fighting large bosses such as Olms in Asylum or the Dragons in Sunspire, as the distance is supposedly calculated from the middle of the boss's hitbox, and they are massive, so essentially you can get a pretty good bonus even if you are in melee range on such fights. For the back bar weapon, we will have the trusty old Maelstrom Bow. This allows the damage for Endless Hail to ramp up for the majority of the duration, so do aim to keep this up. Sul-Xan, as always, has been pretty nice for Bobo setups. After 5 seconds or so, you'll be able to gain the full benefit of the set, providing you keep dealing critical damage, which isn't really too hard of a condition to meet. This allows us to have the freedom to not have to cast a minor force skill such as Barb Trap, should it be inconvenient to do so. I believe here that the Shadow Mundus might actually be better due to the higher crit chance rating given by Tsogvin, but if you try to use other alternatives such as Kinra's, you might still be better off with the Thief Mundus most likely. And finally we have Relequen. Nothing more to say other than keep weaving those light attacks and see the damage come in. So for the skills, on the front bar, the Blackrose bow bar, we have Growing Swarm and Subterranean Assault, as seen before. Acid Spray is a 4-second AoE dot, but with a relatively significant upfront damage, so you can treat this like a semi-spammable to be cast whenever there is nothing else that needs refreshing, essentially. Magnum Shot is the skill buffed by the Blackrose bow. Be aware of the duration of the special dot because it can be dynamic, and then refresh it as soon as it needs refreshing. This will probably be your top priority. Born Etch is just for sustain and can be a flex spot if needed. And for the ultimate, obviously you have your trusty old bear. On the back bar we have Endless Hail, a ground based AoE buffed by the Maelstrom bow. We have Poison Injection, which is kind of weak when the enemy is above 50%, but has an execute mechanic built in that starts when the enemy is below 50%, which becomes pretty good. We have Soul Trap and Winter's Revenge, as seen before. They both cost Magica, so pretty good for your stamina sustain overall. And then we have Barb Trap, which is a decent dot in its own right, but can be a flex spot if you're using Tsogvins, since the set will give you that same buff. Cool, there are the skills, so now let's get on to the Parse. Again, thanks to Cortec for taking the time to record this for us. It's been so long since I played Bobo that I can hardly tell what's going on at first glance, but generally the gist is that he's able to stand a reasonable distance far away to cast Magnum Shot and to make use of the bow distance passive. I don't believe he's standing as far away as he could to get the maximum bonus, but as he's mentioned before to me, getting that 8-second bonus is already really effective with regards to the Blackrose bow, and at this point there is sometimes a risk from being too far away in real gameplay. In the past, he goes in melee to place a Barb Trap here and there, and as with before, it's very much worth keeping up Subterranean Assault with a cast every 6 seconds, and if all other dots are being kept up, then a cheeky Acid Spray here and there will do the rest. In addition, I'll try and leave a simplified static rotation in the description below for us all. In this pass, Cortec hits 106k, which is in line with the other passes previously shown in this video and perhaps somewhat surprisingly strong. Bobo builds haven't necessarily had the best reputation over the years, but this is certainly one that can compete. Anyway, I believe that the blue CP that Cortec has used here are slightly different than the ones previously, so let's catch up at the end of this pass and see all the details there. Catch you in a bit. Great, so I hope you all enjoyed that pass. Here you can immediately see that Virulent Shot, which is the Blackrose bow effect, does a lot of damage here, despite not being able to crit. Altogether, including the initial hit from Scattershot, it's doing around 14k damage, which is a lot. As you can also see, keeping up Subterranean Assault is always worth it, and also Acid Spray is doing a lot of good upfront damage too, though I suppose the crits for this skill has been a little lucky here, as they were for Magnum Shot as well. Overall, you can see that there is a probably larger portion of damage over time effects than in previous passes here, and that will probably affect how the blue CPs have been allocated with this Bobo build. Worth also noting at this point to ignore the CMX build page on the right hand side, where a future update should update the accuracy of this. So yeah, here are the blue CP Slottables that have been used. Do take note that there is a difference between this combination and that of the other builds previously shown. Okay, cool. So thank you guys for making it to the end of the video. I hope that you've gotten a taste to what Stamina Warden has to offer in the Flames of Ambition patch. I think this is literally the longest video I've ever made, so hope it's been worth it. If I can help in any way with any questions or concerns, please do leave me a comment below, and do leave a thumbs up for me and subscribe to me as well as Cortec and Roskag if we've been helpful to you in any way. Also, don't forget to check my website Liko.gg, where the latest builds and gameplay from the new Flames of Ambition patch will drop daily from now, and yeah, hundreds of your favourite ESO content creators will be there, so do check that regularly. Anyway, thanks for watching, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a good day.